My hands trembled as Jack Thompson cracked the wax seal. Inside the thick envelope was a rusted key, heavy as regret, and a slip of paper written in shaky ink. Don't let anyone into the barn before you. What's inside belongs to you. Trust Rex. He'll help you see. Jack's throat went dry. The signature at the bottom wasn't to strangers. Evelyn May Thompson, his grandmother. Dead 3 months. Outside, March rain stitched Toledo in gray, and the wind off the river smelled like rust and old coffee. Inside, the old soldier's instincts lit up like a flare. Trap, threat, ambush. Jack had survived war zones, but this? A dead woman sending orders like a mission briefing. Rex, 5 years old, a traditional German shepherd with a black saddle and tan legs, rose without a bark, pressed close to Jack's knee, eyes locked on the door like he already knew danger was coming. Then the building creaked. Somewhere below, a car door slammed. Tires hissed on wet pavement. Jack stared at the key until his palm reddened with rust. Because if someone else reached that barn first, whatever Evelyn died trying to protect would be gone. The letter. After the war march came to Toledo wearing a wet gray coat. Rain stitched the streets with thin needles, and the wind off the Maumee River carried the smell of rust, cold coffee, and last winter's surrender. Jack Thompson lived in a second-floor walk-up above a closed beauty salon, where the faded sign still promised perms and hope in peeling pink letters. He was 40, white, broad-shouldered in the way men become when they've carried too much for too long. His hair was cut close, not vanity, habit. Brown, threaded with early silver at the temples. A thin scar rode his left cheekbone like a pale lightning bolt, the kind of mark that didn't ask for sympathy, only recognition. Jack's eyes were the thing people noticed if they looked long enough. Blue, yes, but not the bright postcard blue. More like winter sky after a storm, when the clouds have moved on but the cold stays behind. Those eyes belonged to a man who had once learned to sleep in bursts and listen for trouble even inside silence. He had been a soldier, and the war didn't leave when he came home. It moved in quietly, like an uninvited relative, and made itself comfortable in the corners of his mind. Some nights, Jack woke with his heart racing and his hands already searching the room, as if the dark had teeth. Other nights, he didn't sleep at all. He sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee that went cold, watching rain crawl down the window like slow tears. The apartment was neat in an almost military way, but not sterile. A few books stacked by the couch, a worn flannel blanket folded twice, then twice again. A single framed photo on the shelf. Jack in uniform, younger, smiling too hard, the smile of a man trying to prove to himself he deserved it. The only thing that looked truly alive in the room was the dog. Rex was 5 years old, a traditional German shepherd with the classic saddle pattern, black across the back like a cloak, tan legs and chest like sun warmed into fur. His ears stood up like careful questions. His muzzle was strong, his eyes dark and intelligent, the kind that could scold and forgive in the same glance. There was a faint nick in one ear, a souvenir from whatever life he had before the shelter. Rex moved with a quiet authority, as if he'd been appointed guardian of Jack's remaining patience. He wasn't a loud dog. He didn't waste barks on nonsense. But he stayed close, always close, like a compass that refused to spin. Jack sometimes joked, dryly, "You're my parole officer, aren't you?" And Rex would blink slowly, as if agreeing that yes, someone had to keep this man from wandering off into his own storms. That morning, Rex stood at the window and watched the street with the seriousness of a sentry. His tail made a single slow sweep when a delivery truck passed, then stilled again. Jack's phone buzzed with a reminder he didn't need, a follow-up appointment for his knee, the one that ached when the weather changed. He stared at the screen, then flipped the phone face down. A knock came at the door, 2 firm taps, then a pause, then one more. Not neighborly, official. Jack's shoulders tightened before his mind caught up. That reflex lived in his bones. Rex's head lifted. One low rumble vibrated in his chest. Not aggression, just caution. A warning bell with fur. Jack opened the door to find a mail carrier in a damp blue jacket. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and a mustache shaped like a tired question mark. He held an envelope carefully, like it might bite. "Mr. Thompson?" the man asked. Jack nodded once. "Signature required. This one's different." The mail carrier tried for a smile, but it slid off the moment like rain off glass. His gaze flicked to Rex, who sat perfectly still, posture straight, watching as if memorizing the man's heartbeat. Jack signed. The pen felt heavier than it should, as if it carried history. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with dark red wax stamped with a simple design. An oak leaf, pressed so cleanly it looked fresh. Jack's name was written in trembling cursive, the kind that belonged to an older hand fighting against time. He closed the door and stood there a moment, listening. The building groaned softly. Water ran somewhere in the walls. Rex leaned against Jack's leg, warm and steady. "Okay," Jack murmured, though he wasn't sure to whom. "Okay." He carried the envelope to the table, sat down, and placed it in front of him like an unexploded device. The part of him that had once been trained to identify threats began sorting details. Seal intact, paper expensive, handwriting shaky, scent faintly of cedar and something sweet. Vanilla, maybe. Rex sat on the floor beside the chair, eyes fixed on the envelope, as if it were a puzzle he intended to solve. His tail thumped once, soft, encouraging. Jack slid a finger beneath the flap and broke the wax seal. It snapped with a small, final sound that made his chest tighten absurdly, like a door closing in a faraway hallway. Inside was a rusted key wrapped in tissue paper, heavy and cold. Along with it, a slip of paper, yellowed at the edges, covered in the same shaky handwriting. Jack read the message, once, then again, because sometimes words needed a second chance to become real. "My dear boy," it began, "I have waited for you for 14 years. I can't wait any longer. There is something for you in the barn. Don't let anyone enter before you do. And trust Rex. He will help you see." Jack stared at the lines until they blurred. 14 years. The number hit like a small fist. His throat tightened in a way that felt humiliating, the way it always did when memory rose up uninvited. "My dear boy," he whispered aloud, and the phrase sounded wrong in his mouth, too gentle, too warm, like a blanket offered to a man who'd forgotten he was cold. He turned the paper over. There was a name at the bottom. Evelyn May Thompson, his grandmother. Dead 3 months. Jack's fingers curled around the key. Rust bit his skin faintly, leaving a reddish smear. Rex rose and placed his nose against Jack's knee, then looked up at him with steady patience, like a friend who didn't ask you to be brave, only to be present. Jack's mind began doing what it always did when something good tried to happen, searching for the trap. A key, a barn, a warning. a dead woman writing to him as if time were a door she could open. He swallowed hard, and for a moment, he wasn't 40. He was a boy again, holding his breath in the dark, waiting for footsteps that never came. "Is this a joke?" Jack asked the empty room. Rex sneezed once, offended by the concept of jokes involving keys and destiny, then sat again, posture straight as a flagpole. Jack let out a short laugh, one of those half-laughs that sounded like it had been scraped from the bottom of a drawer. "Of course," he muttered. "Even my mail comes with missions now." He read the note again. The line that kept flashing like a signal flare was the strangest one. "Trust Rex." Jack looked down at the shepherd. Rex looked back, calm as a lighthouse. War had taught Jack many things: how to move, how to endure, how to lose. But it hadn't taught him this: how to receive a mystery with a beating heart. He folded the note carefully, as if it were fragile, and placed it beside the key. Outside, the rain kept tapping the window like a patient messenger. Jack reached for his coat. Rex stood too, already ready, because some creatures didn't need to know the whole story to know when it was time to walk into it. And somewhere, far beyond Toledo's wet streets, a barn waited, like a closed mouth, holding a secret. The inheritance in a stranger land. Bozeman greeted Jack with mountain wind and a sky so wide it made a man feel small on purpose. He stepped off the shuttle with Rex at his heel and his duffel slung over one shoulder. The old soldier's way of traveling light, even when his past was heavy. The air bit cleaner here than Toledo's damp breath, pine and snows and cold stone, sharp enough to wake up memories Jack had tried to put to sleep. Downtown Bozeman looked like a postcard that had learned to be practical. Brick storefronts, iron lampposts, and trucks parked like they owned the street. Rex's nails clicked softly on the sidewalk as they walked. The shepherd's ears stayed up, swiveling with quiet discipline, taking in every car door slam and distant laughter, as if cataloging threats. The law office sat in a restored Victorian house painted the color of buttered cream. A brass plate by the door read, "Harrington and Fields, Attorneys at Law." The porch steps sighed under Jack's weight, and for a moment he felt that familiar sensation, entering a room where someone else held the map. Inside, warmth smelled like polished wood and lemon oil. Books lined the walls, not decorative but lived in. Spines cracked, pages used. A woman appeared from behind a half-open door, moving with a brisk grace that suggested she disliked wasting time on drama. She was in her late 40s, tall and slender, with auburn hair pinned in a twist that didn't allow a single strand to misbehave. Her skin was fair, with a dusting of freckles across her cheekbones, and her eyes were a steady hazel, observant, the kind that could read a person without making them feel stripped. She wore a charcoal blazer with a simple silver necklace, and the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime delivering hard truths with soft gloves. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked, voice level as a judge's gavel. "I'm Elaine Harrington." Jack shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, and oddly reassuring. No pity in it, no curiosity disguised as kindness. Rex sat beside Jack's boot without being told, shoulders squared like a well-trained recruit. Elaine glanced down at the dog. "He's handsome," she said, and there was a flicker of warmth in her tone, like sunlight slipping through a crack. "And well-mannered." "He keeps me from making bad decisions," Jack replied. Rex blinked, as if offended by the implication that Jack had other options. Elaine led them into her office, where a wide desk held neat stacks of documents, a fountain pen, and a framed photo of a golden retriever that looked far too pleased with itself. Jack took the chair opposite her, feeling the old reflex again. "Sit where you can see the door." Elaine opened a folder thick as a Bible. Your grandmother, Evelyn May Thompson, executed a revised will 6 months before she passed, she began. It's unusually thorough. Jack's throat tightened at the mention of Evelyn. He had not seen her since he was young. Not really. There had been phone calls that trailed off. A holiday card once, years ago. Then silence. The kind of silence that becomes a habit. Elaine slid a document across the desk. She left you her property in Gallatin County, a ranch, approximately 80 acres with a residence, barn, and outbuildings. There is also a savings account. Not enormous, but not nothing. Jack stared at the paper as if it might rearrange itself into a different life. 80 acres. A ranch. It sounded like a myth. Men like Jack didn't inherit wide horizons. They inherited aches and anniversaries. How much is not nothing? He asked, voice quieter than he intended. Elaine checked her notes. A little under $13,000. Jack exhaled once, slow. It wasn't wealth. It was a bridge. A first step that didn't require begging. Elaine's expression shifted, becoming more careful, as if approaching a corner where something sharp waited. Your grandmother included a personal instruction. It's not legally binding, but she insisted I deliver it verbatim. Jack's fingers curled against his knee. Rex leaned forward slightly. Elaine read from a single page written in trembling cursive. Tell Jack to trust Hank Miller. Tell him not everyone who comes will come clean. Tell him the barn holds what he needs, but only if he gets there first. Jack's stomach tightened. The words fit too well with the letter in his pocket. His soldier's mind began lining up possibilities like targets. Hank Miller, Jack repeated. Elaine nodded. He's been your grandmother's property manager for years. He'll meet you at the ranch if you call. She emphasized his name. Jack's gaze drifted to the window. Mountains rose in the distance like old gods pretending to be rocks. He thought of Evelyn's key, her warning. The way she'd written, trust Rex, as if the dog were part of the inheritance too. Elaine slid a small bundle across the desk, keys on a ring, heavy and old-fashioned. These are for the house, the barn, and the gate. And this, she added a sealed envelope. She asked that you open it after you arrive, not before. Jack didn't touch it yet. He studied Elaine instead. Did she say why? Elaine hesitated, just a breath of uncertainty, quickly mastered. She said you needed the land under your feet when you read it, that it would make sense then. Jack gave a humorless half-smile. That sounds like her. Elaine's eyes softened briefly. It does. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows like it wanted in. Jack stood, thanked her, and left the office with a weight of keys in his pocket and questions crowding his ribs. Rex walked close, shoulder brushing Jack's leg every few steps, steady as a heartbeat. They drove out in a rented pickup that smelled faintly of hay and peppermint gum. The road narrowed, houses thinned. The world opened up into fields still sleeping under late winter's hand. Stone fences cut through the land like old scars. Jack watched it all with the strange unease of a man who has spent years learning to live in small spaces and now is handed a sky. At the ranch gate, a weathered wooden sign read Thompson Ridge in carved letters. The driveway curved through pines toward a white house with dark shutters, its porch sagging slightly at one corner like an old shoulder. The barn stood behind it. Red paint faded to the color of dried blood and sunset. Even from a distance, It looked like something that had held secrets longer than Jack had been alive. Jack parked and stepped out. The air was colder here, cleaner. Rex's nose lifted, tasting it. His tail went still. A sound came from the barn as the wind shifted. A long, low groan from the boards, like old bones complaining. Rex rumbled deep in his chest. The fur along his shoulders rose in a quiet ridge. Jack felt it too, an instinctive prickling at the base of his neck. Not fear exactly, more like recognition, as if the place remembered him and he didn't yet know what it wanted. He walked toward the barn, keys clinking softly. Rex moved beside him, every step measured. At the door, Jack paused. He placed his palm against the rough wood. It was cold, but solid, real in a way his Toledo life had not been for a long time. He inserted the key. The lock turned with a stubborn scrape, then gave. Jack pulled the door open. And the smell that spilled out wasn't rot or dust. It was wood, fresh-cut cedar, linseed oil, metal warmed by hands. Inside, the barn was not a graveyard of farm tools. It was a workshop, orderly, deliberate, almost obsessively arranged. Pegboards lined the walls. Tools hung in precise silhouettes, like a museum of work. Benches ran along both sides, their surfaces scarred with honest use. In the back, under a hanging lamp, sat a wooden box on a small table. The lid was carved with careful letters, Jack Thompson, and beneath his name, a final instruction. Open when you're ready. Rex stepped forward, sniffed the air once, then looked up at Jack as if to say, "This is the part where you stop running." Jack swallowed. Outside, the Montana wind kept singing. Inside, the barn waited. The man in the suit and the $20,000 debt. Morning on Thompson Ridge arrived bright and brittle, sunlight flashing off patches of old snow like broken glass. And Jack woke with that soldier's habit of scanning before breathing. He didn't open Evelyn's sealed envelope yet. He set it on the kitchen counter beside the keys like a live round, something meant for later. The house was quiet in the way new places are quiet. No familiar creaks, no neighborhood noise. Just the hum of a refrigerator working too hard and the distant sigh of wind moving through pine. Rex padded from room to room, nails ticking softly on the worn boards, nose down, reading the house like a book written in scent. Jack poured coffee into a chipped mug he'd found in a cabinet, then took it to the window and watched the driveway. The ranch felt like a gift wrapped in warning tape. Beautiful, open, and too easy to get lost in if you forgot that someone might be watching. He spent the late morning walking the property line, boots crunching gravel, shoulders tight against the cold. The fences were old but mostly intact. The barn, with its faded red skin, stood behind the house like an enormous closed fist. Jack kept seeing that carved box in his mind. Open when you're ready. Like the kind of message you'd leave a man you loved but didn't trust to survive without rules. By noon, the sky had turned a harder blue, and Rex suddenly stopped in the yard, ears snapping forward. Jack heard it a heartbeat later. Tires on gravel, too smooth, too confident for a rural drive. A black SUV rolled up the driveway as if it had been invited. It was spotless, the kind of shine that didn't belong on a road like this, and it stopped near the porch with a careful pause, like a predator deciding how close it could get. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out who looked built for boardrooms, not barns. Derek Caldwell was in his early 50s, tall and lean, with a narrow face that might have been handsome if it hadn't been sharpened into something cold by years of winning. His hair was dark with gray combed back precisely, the kind of style that suggested he loved mirrors. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like armor, and shoes polished so bright Jack could have checked his own expression in them. His smile appeared fast, bright, practiced, and never reached his eyes, which were a pale, icy brown that measured rather than greeted. "Jack Thompson?" he called, voice smooth, carrying that false friendliness people use when they're about to ask for something unreasonable. Jack stepped off the porch, careful to keep his posture loose, hands visible, weight balanced. Rex moved with him and stopped at Jack's left shin, close enough that Jack could feel the heat of the dog's shoulder through denim. Rex didn't bark. He simply stared, still as a statue, eyes locked on the stranger like a scope finding a target. "That's me," Jack said. Derek approached, holding out a hand. The handshake was firm, but it felt like a test. Pressure calibrated to see if Jack would flinch. Jack didn't. Years ago, an explosion had taught him what flinching costs. Derek's gaze slid past Jack to the barn, the house, the fields, taking inventory with a greedy calm. "Beautiful property," he said, as if beauty were another commodity to price. "Evelyn had quite the situation out here." Jack said nothing. Silence, he'd learned, makes liars fill space. Derek's smile thinned, then returned, polished again. "I'm Derek Caldwell," he announced. "I worked with your grandmother. Business, mostly." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, crisp as new money. "I'm sorry for your loss," he added, and the words sounded rehearsed, like lines read from a script 100 times. "But I'm afraid we need to address an outstanding matter." Jack took the paper without inviting Derek closer. He unfolded it slowly, letting the moment stretch. The document was a contract for custom work, dated 18 months prior, listing a commission of 10 pieces totaling $50,000. An advance of $20,000 had been paid. The signature at the bottom read, "Evelyn M. Thompson," in shaky cursive. Jack felt something tighten behind his ribs. Not surprise exactly, but that old soldier's recognition of an ambush. Derek watched Jack's face like a gambler watching cards. "As you can see," Derek said, voice turning solemn with a salesman's gravity, "your grandmother accepted a significant deposit for work she never delivered. Now that she's passed, the debt falls to the estate. And you," he tilted his head, smiling gently, as if explaining math to a child. "You are the estate." Jack kept his breathing steady. He read the contract again, not because he needed the words, but because he wanted Derek to show his impatience. Rex's tail was still. The dog's focus didn't waver. "20,000, Jack said quietly. "That's what you're claiming." "Not claiming," Derek corrected, tapping the paper with one long finger. "Documented." He leaned in a fraction. "I'm not here to be unpleasant, Jack. I'm here to offer a solution." Derek reached into his pocket and produced a business card. Thick stock, embossed letters, expensive enough to imply power. "I have associates who buy land. Quick, clean, no headaches. We can offer you $50,000 for the ranch, buildings included. You pay the 20, walk away with 30. His eyes flicked to Jack's boots, his worn coat, the simple ring of keys in Jack's hand. The look was quick, but it carried a message. "You're not built for this life. Let professionals take it." Jack's jaw tightened, then relaxed. He didn't argue numbers. He didn't accuse Derek of fraud. He simply stored details. The date, the phrasing, the way Derek said associates, the way he avoided saying a buyer's name. "I need time," Jack said. Derek's smile brightened, as if he'd expected resistance and enjoyed it. Of course. I'm a patient man. The lie sat between them, glossy and poisonous. But patience has limits. 60 days. After that, I file. Lawyers, court, depositions. He shrugged as if those were weather patterns. It gets expensive. And people like you. The words paused, then slid out with soft contempt disguised as sympathy. People who are starting over usually prefer not to drown in legal fees. Rex gave a single low growl, barely audible, but sharp enough to cut. Derek's eyes dropped to the shepherd and hardened. "Control your dog," he snapped, the mask slipping for the first time. Jack's voice stayed level. "My dog is controlled. You're the one raising your voice on my porch." Derek's face smoothed again, though something sour lingered at the corners of his mouth. He stepped back, straightened his cuffs, and held out the card. Jack took it. Derek turned toward the SUV, then looked over his shoulder with that cold smile that never warmed. "Think it over," he said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The SUV rolled away, black and glossy, leaving the gravel dust to settle like an insult. Jack stood still long after the sound faded, watching the empty road as if it might speak. Rex pressed against his leg, a silent anchor. Jack looked down at the contract again. The signature looked convincing. Too convincing. That was the danger. Fraud wasn't loud. It was quiet, well-dressed, and confident. "Okay," Jack murmured. Not because he accepted the threat, but because he accepted the reality. Someone wanted this land. That night came early, the temperature dropping fast. Jack ate a simple dinner, beans from a can, bread toasted in an old oven, and kept the lights low. He moved through the house, checking locks twice, then a third time, not because he forgot, but because his mind refused to believe safety. Rex followed, shadowing him. Near midnight, Rex's head lifted, his ears angled toward the yard. Jack froze. There, faint, metallic, something like wire rasping against wire. Jack slipped on his boots without turning on the overhead light. He took a flashlight, kept it off, and opened the back door slowly. Cold air hit him like a slap. Rex went first, silent as smoke. They moved toward the fence line where moonlight made the snow look blue. The flashlight clicked on, a narrow beam cutting through darkness. Jack saw it immediately. The fence wire had been cut clean, the ends twisted back like someone had practiced. Beyond it, in the soft dirt where snow had melted, were tire marks, fresh, wide. Not from the ranch truck. Rex sniffed, then growled low, the sound of a dog who understood that danger doesn't always wear a face. From the direction of the barn came a dull thump, as if a door had shifted or a board had been kicked. Jack's pulse rose, steady and controlled. A part of him, the part forged overseas, went cold and clear. This wasn't just paperwork. This was pressure. This was someone testing the perimeter. Jack aimed the flashlight at the barn and saw nothing move, but he felt the message in the dark all the same. Sell, or we'll make you. He backed toward the house, Rex tight at his side, and locked the door behind them with careful hands. Then Jack stood in the kitchen, contract on the table, the sealed envelope from Elaine still unopened, and he understood the truth that had been waiting since Toledo. His grandmother hadn't left him peace. She'd left him a fight. The mark beneath the signature. The next morning, Jack drove into town with a thermos of coffee, a jaw set like a locked door, and Rex in the passenger seat watching the world through the windshield as if it might suddenly lunge. Bozeman was only a short stretch of highway away, but the distance felt longer when every mile carried the question of who else knew he was alone on that ranch. Jack kept the contract folded in his jacket pocket, the paper warm against his chest like a parasite. He had spent most of the night awake, sitting at the kitchen table with the porch light off, listening to the ranch settle and the wind drag its fingernails along the barn. When dawn came, it didn't bring comfort. It brought clarity. A predator had tested his fence. Predators didn't stop because you wished them polite. He needed allies. He needed proof. He needed the kind of record a soldier trusts, details that hold up under pressure. Hank Miller met him outside the small hardware store on Main Street, a place that smelled of fertilizer, rubber boots, and coffee brewed too strong for anyone who expected ease. Hank was in his late 50s, tall with a stooped, weather-made posture, as if the sky had been leaning on him for decades. He had a thick gray beard that looked trimmed by habit rather than vanity, and his hair was a silver mess that refused to stay under his faded ball cap. His skin was wind-browned and lined, the kind of face you get from living outside and telling the truth without embellishment. Hank's eyes were pale green and blunt, kind but not soft, eyes that had seen too many people get talked out of what was theirs. He shook Jack's hand with a grip like rough lumber. "You're Evelyn's boy," he said, voice gravelly, the words carrying an old affection that surprised Jack. "She talked about you. More than you'd think." Jack didn't know what to do with that, so he nodded once, the way he used to nod at commanders when emotions weren't allowed to interfere. Rex jumped out of the truck and sniffed Hank's boots. Hank crouched with a slow carefulness, held out a hand, and let Rex decide. The shepherd's tail gave a single, measured wag. "Good dog," Hank murmured, and there was respect in it, like one professional recognizing another. "He's reading you," Jack said. "Let him," Hank replied. "Rex'll know if I'm worth a damn." They drove to the sheriff's office together in Hank's pickup, the kind of truck that wore mud like a badge. The building was small brick, plain as a textbook, sitting beside a diner that advertised pie like it was religion. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed. A deputy at the desk barely glanced up until Hank said his name. Then the deputy's expression shifted into something like relief, as if Hank meant the day would stay sane. Sheriff Clara Jensen came out from the back with a file in one hand and a travel mug in the other. She was in her early 40s, average height but built strong through the shoulders. The kind of strength that didn't come from a gym, but from showing up every day where men thought they could intimidate you. Her hair was dark blonde, pulled into a tight braid that swung like a rope down her back. Her skin was fair, sun-freckled across the nose, and a thin scar cut through one eyebrow. A clean line that hinted at a past that didn't like talking about itself. Her eyes were a sharp gray, steady and unromantic. Eyes that measured danger the way a carpenter measures wood. She looked Jack up and down once, not judging his clothes, but reading his stance. "You're the new Thompson," she said. "Jack." Her tone was neutral, but not unkind. "And you're the vet Hank called about." Jack didn't correct her. The word vet sat on his shoulders like a uniform he couldn't take off. "Derek Caldwell came yesterday," Jack said, and pulled the contract from his pocket. Clara took it, scanned, and her mouth tightened at the corners. Hank leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, anger darkening his face like a storm rolling in. "That snake," Hank muttered. "He's back." Clara flicked her gaze to Jack. "He always comes back. Caldwell's got a pattern. Waits until someone dies, shows up with paperwork and a smile,
and acts like the law is a weapon he owns. She tapped the signature line. He's been doing this across counties for years. Most folks panic. They sell. They pay him. He walks away clean. Jack's voice stayed low. And you can't stop him? Clara's expression sharpened. Something like frustration, something like old exhaustion. We can investigate. We can warn. But unless we can prove forgery or coercion in court, he's a slippery bastard with lawyers. Hank snorted. Evelyn hated him. She'd rather chew glass than sign anything for Caldwell.
Jack's stomach tightened. Then the signature is fake. Clara nodded, but her eyes didn't soften. Maybe, but maybe doesn't hold cuffs. Jack stared at the contract like it might confess. My fence was cut last night, he said. Fresh tire tracks. Someone was around the barn. Clara's gaze went colder. That's different, she said. Paper threats are one thing, trespass is another, intimidation is another. She set the contract down. Go back to the ranch. Don't confront anyone alone. If you hear anything, call. And if you find anything, letters, notes, records, anything that proves Evelyn never dealt with Caldwell, bring it to me. Hank pushed off the wall. Evelyn was meticulous, he said. She kept records like the apocalypse was coming. Then he looked at Jack, and for the first time his tough face showed something gentler. We'll search the barn, together. Back at Thompson Ridge, the barn felt different in daylight, less haunted and more like a sleeping beast. Hank walked through the workshop with a reverence that wasn't sentimental but practical, fingers hovering near tools as if greeting old friends. She built half this county's best tables, he murmured. And she built them to outlast the lies people tell. Jack opened drawers, checked ledgers, ran his eyes over labels. Rex moved ahead, nose low, breathing in the dust and oil and old grief baked into the wood. Hank pulled out notebooks and flipped through pages with calloused hands, the handwriting neat, patient, as if Evelyn had written to keep the world from falling apart. Hours passed in a quiet rhythm. Open, scan, stack, repeat. It was work, and Jack's mind liked work. Work gave pain somewhere to go. In the small room behind the workshop, the tack room turned office, Jack opened a cabinet and found receipts, gallery contacts, lists of commissions. Hank checked the floorboards with his boot, listening. She had hiding places, Hank said. Always did. Grew up poor, trusted no one with loose cash or loose truth. Rex suddenly stopped near the far wall, ears forward. He sniffed the baseboard, then pawed once, hard. The sound was different, hollow. Jack crouched, pressed his fingers along the floorboard seam, and felt a slight notch. Rex pawed again, impatient, as if saying, "Here, now." Jack pried up the board with a screwdriver. The wood lifted with a reluctant groan, revealing a shallow cavity beneath. Inside was a bundle of envelopes tied with twine, yellowed at the edges, and a small leather journal. Jack's hands went still. His chest tightened in a way he didn't like. He pulled the envelopes out. Each one was addressed in Evelyn's trembling cursive, some to Jack, some to institutions, some to people whose names Jack didn't recognize. Many bore stamped words, "Return to sender," "Undeliverable." Hank's face changed when he saw them, the anger softening into something like grief. "She wrote," Hank said quietly. "She wrote and wrote." Jack's throat tightened, and he hated the sudden heat behind his eyes. He opened the journal. On one page, dated years back, Evelyn's handwriting turned sharper, darker, as if rage had steadied her hand. Derek Caldwell came again. Tried to pressure me into signing. I threw him off the property. I will never sign anything for him. Keep this as proof. Jack exhaled slowly. It was not the kind of proof a courtroom loved, but it was the kind of proof a truth loved. This matters, Clara had said. Jack imagined handing this over. He imagined Derek's smile cracking. Then Hank said, "There's more." He pointed to a dusty laptop on a shelf, half covered by a canvas tarp. "Evelyn recorded videos," Hank explained. "Said she wanted the craft to survive her." Jack wiped the dust off and powered it on. The screen flickered to life. A folder labeled "Final Lessons" sat on the desktop, dated just months before Evelyn died. Jack clicked the last file. Evelyn appeared on screen. Older, thinner, silver hair pulled back, eyes still bright with stubborn fire. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the camera. "Jack," she said, looking straight into the lens as if she could see him through time. "Listen carefully. If anyone shows up with a contract and my name, look at my signature." She held up a page close to the camera. "See that small mark beneath the first letter? I've put it under my signature for years. A tiny cut, almost invisible. It's my lock against thieves." Jack paused the video, leaned in, studied the signature. There it was, a faint notch beneath the first letter, a secret only someone taught would ever notice. He pulled Derek's contract from his pocket and compared. The signature looked right, too right. But beneath the first letter, there was nothing. No notch, no secret. Jack's chest loosened with a hard, fierce relief. A soldier who had once searched sand for wires was now searching ink for truth. And the truth was clean. Derek Caldwell was lying. Rex sat beside Jack, calm again, as if the dog had known all along that the right scent always leads to the right place. Jack looked at Hank and saw the same realization in the older man's eyes. This wasn't just survival now. This was a counterattack, built not from bullets, but from evidence Evelyn had hidden like a gift for a son she couldn't raise, but refused to abandon. The night of reckoning and the gentle after. 3 days before Derek's deadline, the wind changed its voice, turning low and mean, as if the mountains were warning the valley not to trust what arrived on 4 wheels. Jack spent those days like a man building a shelter inside his own ribs. He didn't sleep much. He worked. He copied Evelyn's journal entry, printed still frames from the video that showed the tiny notch beneath her signature, and organized the returned letters in neat stacks that smelled faintly of thyme. Hank came by each morning with strong coffee and the steady presence of someone who had buried too many friends to waste breath on fear. Sheriff Clara Jensen called twice a day, brief and precise, her voice the calm of a woman who'd learned that panic was just noise with teeth. Rex stayed close through it all, shadowing Jack from room to room, then claiming his post by the front window as if he had been promoted to watch commander. On the morning Derek returned, the sky was bright but cold, sunlight spilling across the yard like a blessing that didn't know what it was blessing. Jack saw the SUV before he heard it, a black beetle crawling up the driveway, shine untouched by dust. It stopped near the porch with a sharper, more aggressive brake than before. Derek stepped out and didn't bother wearing his smile properly this time. It hung on his face like a mask he'd grown tired of holding up. Behind him climbed another man, younger and thicker through the chest, with a shaved head and a neck that looked like it had been carved from a fence post. His skin was sallow, his eyes narrow and restless, and his hands stayed close to his pockets as if he liked tools that didn't need to be shown. He wore a dark hoodie under a cheap jacket, the kind of clothing people choose when they don't want to be remembered. The stranger's mouth pulled into a grin that was all hunger and no humor. Derek marched up the steps without asking permission. "I'm done waiting," he snapped, voice sharp enough to cut through the wind. "You've had time. You've had your little tantrum. Now sign the transfer papers and we end this clean." Jack stepped onto the porch, hands relaxed, shoulders square, the soldier's stance that said, "I'm not your prey." He wore an old field jacket that made him look like what he was, someone trained not to flinch. Rex sat at Jack's left side, calm but coiled, ears forward, eyes locked on Derek the way an oath locks to a flag. Derek held out a folder thick with documents. 50,000. Today. You pay the debt. You walk away with cash. That's more than fair for someone in your situation. He let the last word drip with contempt, as if Jack's life were a stain. Jack took the folder but didn't open it. He looked Derek in the eye instead. "You brought company." Derek's lips curled. "Insurance." He nodded at the stranger. "This is Mason Klein. He helps me with logistics." Mason lifted his chin like a dog challenging another dog, then let his gaze slide past Jack toward the barn, as if already measuring which window would break easiest. Jack's voice stayed even. "No one signs anything on my porch." Derek's face tightened, anger showing through the polished surface. "You don't get to make rules. You're a caretaker here, not an owner. You're a man with a debt and no leverage." Jack set the folder down on the porch railing. "You want leverage?" he asked softly. "Here's what you have. A forged contract." Derek's smile flickered, just a blink of unease, then returned harder. "Watch your mouth." Jack turned slightly, and in that movement, he felt Rex's body shift too, the shepherd matching him like a shadow. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a printed image. Evelyn's signature from the video, enlarged so the tiny notch beneath the first letter showed clearly. He held it up like a lantern. "My grandmother's signature," Jack said. "See that mark? It's on every real document she signed for years. Your contract doesn't have it." Mason let out a short laugh, the sound ugly and dismissive. Derek's eyes narrowed. "That proves nothing," Derek spat. "Ink fades. People's hands shake. Signatures change." Jack's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Then explain this." He held up Evelyn's journal entry, the page where she'd written about throwing Derek off the property and swearing never to sign anything for him. The words were clear, furious, and dated years before her death. For a heartbeat, Derek went still. The air around him seemed to tighten. Then his face rearranged into rage, pure, bright, and reckless. "You think some scribbles from a dead woman scare me?" he barked. "You think you can play lawyer because you watched a little home video?" Jack's heart beat slow and heavy, the way it did when he'd walked patrols overseas. He could feel the moment turning, the hinge of it. He knew what came next before it happened. Mason moved. Not toward Jack, toward the side of the house, cutting around with quick steps, heading for the barn like a rat for a pantry. His eyes stayed down, his shoulders hunched, pretending he was just stretching his legs. But his hand slipped into his pocket, and the sun flashed off something metal for a split second. Rex stood instantly, a silent explosion of motion. The shepherd's bark tore through the morning like a siren, loud and commanding, the sound of a warning that demanded to be obeyed. Rex shot off the porch and sprinted across the yard, cutting Mason off before he reached the barn doors. He didn't bite. He didn't need to. He planted himself between Mason and the barn, teeth bared, chest lifted, barking in sharp bursts that said one thing clearly: not one more step. Mason swore, startled, and swung his arm as if to shove the dog aside. Rex lunged forward just enough to make Mason stumble back, the shepherd's eyes blazing with controlled fury. Derek's head snapped toward the commotion. "Mason!" he shouted, and the name sounded less like an order and more like panic. Then the world answered Derek's panic with something louder. A cruiser rolled into the driveway from behind the trees, lights flashing, gravel spraying. Another vehicle followed. Sheriff Clara Jensen stepped out first, posture rigid, hand already near her cuffs. 2 deputies moved with her, quick and practiced. Hank appeared from behind a truck parked farther down, his face grim, holding a phone like he'd been waiting for this exact moment to bloom. Clara's voice cut clean through the chaos. "Derek Caldwell, Mason Klein, step away from the property and keep your hands where I can see them." Derek's face drained of color. "This is a civil matter," he stammered, and for the first time his voice sounded less like steel and more like paper. Clara didn't blink. "Forgery is not civil. Extortion is not civil. Trespass is not civil." She nodded once at Jack. "And we have the evidence." Jack handed her the folder he'd prepared. The signature comparison, the journal entry, the returned letters, the printed frame from Evelyn's video. Clara took it like a judge receiving a verdict she'd waited years to hear. Mason backed away from Rex, hands raised, trying to laugh it off. "Dog's crazy," he muttered. Rex barked once more, then stood perfectly still, tail low, eyes steady, guarding the barn as if it were sacred ground. Clara stepped forward, her shadow falling across Derek's polished shoes. "You're under arrest," she said, and the words landed like a final nail. "Fraud, forgery, attempted theft by deception, and unlawful entry. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Derek's mouth opened, then closed again. His eyes darted to Jack, and hate burned there, bright and childish. "You don't deserve this," he hissed. "You're nothing. A washed-up soldier who got lucky." Jack felt the insult hit the old bruise inside him, the one that had told him for years he didn't belong anywhere, that he was only useful when war needed him. He thought of Evelyn's letters, returned and unread. He thought of the notch beneath her signature, a secret she'd planted like a seed for him to find. He thought of Rex, standing guard with a loyalty that asked for nothing. Jack's voice came out quiet but unshakable. "I'm not nothing. This is home." The deputies cuffed Derek. Mason was taken next, still trying to grin as if charm could unwrite consequences. The cruisers backed down the drive with their prisoners, the sound fading into the wide Montana sky. When it was over, the ranch breathed again. Jack stood in the yard as the wind moved through the pines, cool and clean, and felt something inside him loosen, like a heavy pack unstrapped after a long march. Rex trotted back to him, ears high, tongue lolling with sudden goofy pride, then sat at Jack's feet and leaned in, asking silently for the only reward he ever wanted. "We're still together." Hank clapped Jack's shoulder once, a rare gesture of affection from a man built on restraint. Clara nodded, her expression softening a fraction. "You did good," she said. "Evelyn would have liked this ending." That evening, Jack opened the workshop and turned on every light. The tools gleamed on the wall like a constellation made for hands. He sat at Evelyn's bench and ran his fingers over the wood, feeling the grooves worn by decades of work. For the first time since he'd come home from war, he wasn't scanning for danger. He was imagining a future. He decided to stay, not just to keep the land, but to build something on it, something that lasted, something honest. He would learn the craft Evelyn had left behind. He would invite other veterans who carried invisible packs to come here and put their hands on real work. He would take in dogs like Rex, working dogs, discarded dogs, loyal hearts needing purpose, and give them a place to stand guard over peace. Rex, of course, immediately proved he was still Rex by stealing a sausage from Hank's lunch bag when no one was looking, then trotting away with the proud, guilty swagger of a thief who believes he's a hero. Jack laughed, an actual laugh, full-bodied and surprised, while Rex pretended not to hear him. Outside, the wind kept moving, but it no longer sounded like a warning. It sounded like the beginning. Some folks call it luck. Some call it timing. But out here, when a door opens at the exact moment you've run out of strength, it feels less like coincidence and more like a quiet mercy. Like God reaching into the ordinary and turning it into a miracle you can actually hold. Jack didn't get a perfect past. He got scars, sleepless nights, and a heart trained to expect the worst. Yet somehow, God planted help along his path. One faithful dog with a guardian soul. One old friend who showed up at the right hour. One hidden mark beneath a signature that told the truth when lies came dressed in shiny shoes. And that's how grace often works. Not as thunder in the sky, but as small lights placed in the dark so you can take one more step. If you're watching this today and you feel like you're standing alone on your own front porch, facing worries, bills, loss, or fear, please hear this. You are not forgotten. God can rebuild a life from what's been broken. Sometimes He sends a letter. Sometimes He sends a person. Sometimes He sends a loyal companion who won't let you give up. And sometimes the miracle is simply this: you made it through another day, and you're still here to begin again. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment that felt like God's protection? Something that saved you, guided you, or gave you hope when you had none? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be the very comfort someone else is praying for tonight. If this story touched your heart, please tap the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that miracles can still happen, quietly, faithfully, right in the middle of real life. May God bless you, keep you safe, and fill your home with peace. May He strengthen your heart, steady your steps, and send you the help you need, right on time. Amen.